You're listening to WCAT Radio, your home for authentic Catholic programming.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Faith in Sport. I'm Dr. John Acquaviva. Thank you for joining us today here on Radio Maria. Faith in Sport, where we look at sport through a Catholic lens. Here's what we are doing today. We have Ed Billick joining us. We're going to talk about sports topics of the day, including our hit or miss. Ed is a longtime friend, member of this show for years, has been my special guest, a radio veteran. I'm so glad Ed is here to join me. He's going to join this conversation in just 1 minute. In the second half of the show, special guest Deacon Dan Borne. I consider him a friend of this show as well. He's in the Diocese of Baton Rouge. He's a permanent deacon at St. John Vianney and the voice of LSU football and basketball. You know, when you hear the loudspeaker and somebody says something about the game or the attendance, that's Deacon Dan Borne. And when you hear his voice in the second half of the show, it's like another Ed Billick. It's just this wonderful, deep, articulate voice. Deacon Dan Borne, he's going to join us in the second half of the show. We're going to do weekend headlines, and we're going to end the whole thing with a quick Q&A with Dr. A. Either way, wherever, whenever, however you're joining us today here on Radio Maria, I am appreciative of it. I know Ed is too. Speaking of Ed, let's have a conversation with Ed Billick right now. Ed, brother, welcome back to the show. How you doing?
Good, John. Doing very well. I mean, family's doing well and everything as we get ready for Thanksgiving. And it's no, just good times, good times. I don't want to talk about our professional football teams and the troubles they have, but we can't rely our moods to be based on our sports teams. That's not the right thing to do. We need to have our mood based on our relationship with Jesus Christ.
Yeah, and I think further through that, a great deal of our mood, I think, especially once we get in the married life and we have children, it's a lot based on that. But I think everybody knows this. Family life is hard. Family life can be chaotic. Family life can be messy. But if we bring God into that, it makes things make more sense. And I think in most cases, it can help things not be as messy, be more holy, and so forth. Brother, you and I often, just about every time we do this show, we do what's called the hit or miss. And this is where we talk about something that has happened recently in the world of sport that we find either positive or negative, something that's good or bad for our culture, for the sport, whatever that is. I have a great one. I'm looking forward to it. But as always, you go first. And you said off the air that you have a hit for us. Tell us what you got.
You know, John, it was funny. We were at our Curcio group on Saturday. We've been grouping since 2016. Many of our listeners, if they're in Curcio or they know the powers of grouping. Anyhow, Josh said to me, haven't you guys seen It Ain't Over? I go, it ain't over. It sounds like something Yogi Berra would say. He said, absolutely. There's a show right now on Netflix called It Isn't Over. It Ain't Over. Okay. And it is a documentary on Yogi Berra. And last night I turned it on instead of watching Sunday Night Football. Have you seen it, John?
I have seen it advertised. Is it on Netflix? Where'd you get
Netflix, yeah.
Netflix, okay.
And I tell you what, a second I'll watch a little bit, may fall asleep. I watched the entire thing. It was fantastic. Yeah. And of course, we all know the Yogi Berra was a devout Catholic.
Yep.
He freely talked about his faith. He used to always be at 5:30 Mass over there at the Church of the Immaculate Conception.
Awesome.
By the way, in 2015, when he died, guess who held his funeral was Cardinal Timothy Dolan.
Is that true?
Yeah. It was a private funeral mass with the Cardinal. So, I mean, he was highly respected. But the whole film is, the yogiisms, the cartoonish figure that he was.
Yep.
He was such a wonderful baseball player. And his granddaughter, she talks through it a lot, and she rallied people to put this together. But, it was 10 World Series titles, 3 MVP awards, 18 All-Star selections. Wow. But this 98 minutes captures his whole legacy on and off the field. It seemed like everything he touched, including the 1969 New York Mets.
That's right.
When Gil Hodges, we talked about Gil Hodges, his breakup with George Steinbrenner, and when he got back together. And what I really loved is his cute wife, Carmen. They were married for 65 years, and she was the rock. If you listen to Sunday's Gospel, she was the rock. He was blessed to have a wonderful wife, but it is a fantastic documentary. Folks, you got to go watch it. It ain't over. Just take that fork in the road, and you'll be okay. I mean, there's a lot of yogiisms, and they talk a lot about that. It says you can observe a lot by watching, and you need to watch this. You need to watch this video.
You can observe a lot by watching. Let me ask you this about the Yogi Berra documentary. It ain't over. Often, in fact, almost every time we turn on the TV, I want to watch something with my wife, Alicia. Did Jackie watch this with you, your wife? Did she enjoy it?
She was watching something else, and I stumbled across it. And
do you think she would enjoy it though? If she were to watch it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. She's a big New York fan, a Yogi Berra fan, and it was fantastic.
That's good to hear.
And it had a lot of goodness about it. Even his son Dale Barrett talked openly about that cocaine problem he had when he played with the Pirates back in the early 80s. And he said his dad and mom said, if you want to continue to have a father and continue to have a mother and continue to have brothers and sisters, you will stop this craziness. And then on the film, it says it's been 27 years. He's been, drug-free, alcohol-free. Awesome. So a lot of redemption, I could just go on and talk about it, but it was great. It was moving. Definitely a hit.
One of the things about Yogi Berra that I've noticed in any interview, whether it was a long time ago or recently, and I want to say he died in the last 10 years. Does that sound about
2015.
Right?
Yeah, 8 years ago.
And whenever I see him, regardless of where he was in his career, regardless how old he was, he just seems to be like the glass is always half full. And he's filled with optimism. He's filled with humor. And he's one of those guys where if you knew him personally, you'd go, I want to spend more time with that guy. And my guess is in part, that's why he was so endearing, right? He just had this way about him where people just wanted to be around him. And he was a winner.
And his ability to build chemistry in the locker rooms and all his players loved him. He connected Babe Ruth all the way through Derek Jeter. He shook hands with Babe. Babe welcomed the Yankees in the 40s. And then he was with Joe DiMaggio, played with Joe. He played with Mickey and Roger and Whitey. He caught Don Larson's perfect game in that 56 World Series. Maybe we have some older folks, then they can relate to what I'm saying here on Radio Maria. And then he ties him and Derek Jeter really tight together. So you talk about, and I'm not a big Yankee fan, but I'm a baseball fan. Sure. Bob Costas is in it. You and I like Bob Costas, but a devout Catholic. There's your athlete of the week.
Very good. And your hit of the week. I appreciate you passing that along. Brother, as much as anything, that was not only a plug for, Yogi Berra and a great, story to pass along to our audience. But once again, we plug Netflix. I think more than once we've talked about Netflix on here. So they should give us some stock options or something, Ed. Something there, brother. But no, I thank you. And I'm glad you mentioned that because I saw it and I probably would watch it sometime, but maybe it'll be sooner than later. So
watch it with the boys.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I think my son would love that. Folks, Ed just mentioned you're listening to Radio Maria. I want to thank you wherever, whenever, and however you're joining us in Radio Maria land. This is Faith in Sport, where we apply our faith to all aspects of sport. So whether you are an athlete, a parent of an athlete, grandparent, official, an administrator, if you're involved in sport in any way, this is the show for you because we like to weave in ethics, character, morality into this conversation of everyday sport. And that leads to my part of the conversation. Ed just gave us his hit. I have a hit as well. Ed, listen to this, brother. I think this is going to make your heart warm. This past weekend, my 12-year-old son, Luke, and I drove up to Northern Virginia area. We stayed with my father-in-law, Mick, my wife's father, and we drove another 40 minutes beyond that on Saturday morning because we got tickets to the University of Maryland, University of Michigan football game. Yeah. And my wife and I agree, we discussed and agreed to, with our 5 kids, as they turn 12, within the next couple weeks or a couple months after they turn 12, we're going to take them on an excursion, some type of overnight trip. And get this. Our friend Alicia and I's, longtime friend, Father Conrad Murphy, is not only the Catholic campus minister on the campus of University of Maryland, he is the chaplain for the football team. And I knew that we would get not only tickets, or confident that we would get tickets, but I was pretty confident that we'd get good seats because one of the members of the Catholic community through the football team is the head coach there. So if you want to get tickets to a football game, you talk to the chaplain, and further, the chaplain talks to the coach. Ed, we were about on the 35-yard line, about 20 rows up. Great seats, and so much action took in right in front of us. Needless to say, it was a great weekend. We had great weather to travel up and back, but Luke and I bonded. It was the only time that we've gone away like that, just him and I, and in fact, if not only that, but I haven't traveled like that with any of our other kids, at least one-on-one like that. It was a bonding experience to us. And I'll share with the audience, and I'll share with you too, Ed, that it was a dual fold weekend. There's a program called Passport to Purity, and it's a DVD or a CD set driven program to help you talk to your preteen about peer pressure, about relationships, about all those matters that are really important that can change their lives for the better or for the worse. And we listened to these CDs a total of probably about 3 hours. We were on the road for about a total of about 16 hours total. And we use that time to listen to these CDs and then start these conversations about these ever important preteen messages. I'll let the listener go further online and find out more about Passport to Purity. But brother, it was fantastic. I want to thank Father Conrad Murphy, our lifelong friend, or our longtime friend, I should say, who got us those tickets. I want to thank my father-in-law. He let us stay at his house, and we just had a terrific time.
Well, that sounds like a win-win-win. Now, a couple couple questions here.
Go ahead.
Were you wearing your Michigan blue through all that?
I do have a Michigan sweatshirt. I had a thicker one on than that. I didn't wear it. But you know what, Ed? And I'll say this outright. I kind of regret this, but not much. But I told Luke not to wear it. You know why? Because there was a possibility that we were going to get sideline passes and be on the sideline of Maryland. And I thought that might have been a little disrespectful.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's an arguable point. I totally get that. But you know what? We were around a bunch of University of Maryland fans. It was clear from the first moment of the game that we were Michigan fans. Nobody said anything. Nobody did anything disrespectfully. It was a wonderful experience.
Is this the first time you've been to a big time college football game in a while?
Yeah, in a while. Third time. I saw the University of Michigan when I was in college at Michigan. Then I saw Notre Dame, Michigan at Notre Dame when I was in the seminary. I went with a friend who played football there. And then this was the number 3 one. And I've only been to a couple games overall, despite how big a fan I am. I'm like you, probably, Ed, and like most people, I enjoy football most from the living room. It's made for the living room. It really is. It's made for TV, just all the camera angles and the way that it can be like an eagle's eye in the field and so forth. But brother, there's nothing like being there. And my favorite part of the whole weekend, other than bonding with Luke, just in general, was watching his eyes when the play was right in front of us. They were just big as saucers. And he was like, wow, I'm like really here. So,
and you just created a lifelong memory.
That's right.
When we're up in heaven, years and years from now, he'll remember that till he's an old man.
I think you will, brother. And that's one of the reasons I tied that purity program into it, because I wanted to cement those two together. So I know that that'll be a lifelong memory, but I'm hoping that starts a whole lot of lifelong conversations also with my son.
Let's talk a little bit about this program. Is it sex education, or is it just a Catholic? Oh, it is.
It is. It's not Catholic. It's Christian based. It's led by these this husband and wife team that really care about their kids and how they grew up. And they basically passed along with some of the things they learned, both negative and positive, into this program called Passport to Purity. And it is really well done. It's paced well. They give enough information, but not too much information. And it's, again, about peer pressure, but it's also about the birds and the bees conversation that all parents should have with their preteen kids.
Folks, here on Radio Maria with Dr. John Acquaviva, I'm Ed Billick, and it's interesting all these years, and we've been together since 2016 doing this program in different forms. That's one of the top 3 hits I think you've ever had.
One. Yeah.
Oh, that's a Hall of Fame hit.
No, I agree, brother. I was looking forward to, and I knew as soon as we were going to do this, that this would be, we got these tickets 2 months ago. Father Conrad was gracious enough to delve into this and get the tickets and so forth. And I knew it was going to be a hit. So,
listeners, we'd love to hear your hits. I mean, if you have a great weekend sports hit tied into your faith, send it to Dr. Acquaviva. John, how can they get a hold of you?
I appreciate that, brother. One of two ways. You can tweet me at j.acquaviva1. That's the number one, j.acquaviva1. You can tweet me, or you can just email me, and it's even simpler probably, faithandsport@wingate.edu. Wingate University is where I teach. Again, it's faith and sport, A&D, faithandsport@wingate.edu. Ed, thank you for saying that. Not only do we want to hear your hits, I want to hear some good sports-related, faith-related stories that you had that you could share with the listeners. Heck, if it's that good, I might even put you on the air with us, and you can be one of the special guests that we have, because we want to hear stories like that. And also, we want to hear from you just what you think about the show. And also, if there's anybody in your community that you think is uplifting, has a good story to tell, that is faithful individual and they're involved in sports somehow, I'd love for you to hear from them.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Brother, there's a couple other things I want to talk to you about. The Megan Rapinoe story. Did you hear about this? I think I sent you an article that was online, and this is actually one of the biggest stories literally in the past 10 days, and I thought it's worth talking about. So Megan Rapinoe has been repeatedly, most of the time I think it's negative, certainly from the Christian perspective, and certainly from the perspective of kind of like the conservative traditionalists when it comes to sport. She's outspoken, different color hair, has been on the national women's soccer team for years, has won the Olympics, has won World Cups and so forth. And in the final game of this year's championship, she was playing in this United States Soccer League, and there was it was the championship, and just a couple minutes into it, she ruptured her Achilles tendon, and the Achilles is what attaches your calf muscle to your heel, and once that happens, you can't run. It's a year between the time that you can have the operation until the time you start running full speed. It's a long time. It's a devastating injury, especially to an athlete. Now, this is the quote, Ed, that she said after she tore her Achilles. This is what she said that was so controversial and started so much discussion. Now, by the way, it was laden with expletives. I'm going to pull those out or just paraphrase that part. She said, I thought about this a little bit, talking about her ruptured Achilles tendon. She said, I mean, I'm not a religious person or anything, and if there was a God, this is proof there isn't a God. She said, so yeah, this is messed up. It's like 6 minutes into this championship game and my Achilles goes out. And it was all over the internet. It was all over news services. I think people jumped on this. And for the most part, there was a backlash that she got, and rightfully so. And in part, folks, I want to read from, believe it or not, our catechism. There's two things I want to read. One of them is in the part about faith, and the other part in the catechism is about the Christian mystery. In particular, it's under the heading of Christ the physician. So this is on the part about faith. This is 164 in our Catholic Catechism. Now, however, we walk by faith, not by sight. We perceive God as in a mirror dimly and only in part. Even though enlightened by him in whom it believes, faith is often lived in darkness and can be put to the test. The world we live in often seems very far from the one promised us by faith. Our experience of evil and suffering, injustice and death seem to contradict the good news. They can make our faith and become a temptation against it. And I thought that was perfect and has directly to do with any injury an athlete might have, not just Megan Rapinoe, but there is going to be some dark moments. And Ed, you and I both know that nowhere in Scripture there's a promise of joy each and every day and success in everything we do. And that was telling to the faithful, both of the Christian faith and the Catholic Christian faith, of where people are. Sometimes they get an injury and they just chalk it up to there couldn't be a God.
No, whose words are these again?
Megan Rapinoe, the purple-haired, red-haired gal.
Yeah. I know. It's just hard to believe that that's coming from her.
No, I know, but actually, Ed, it's not so surprising. She's made some really controversial statements, some really negative statements, and I thought this sounds normal. This sounds just right to come from her. Now, by the way, this is another part of the catechism that directly addresses her anger at being injured in the last game of her career, this championship game, in which it says, the Holy Spirit gives to some a special charism of healing, so as to make manifest the power of the grace of the risen Lord. But even the most intense prayers do not always obtain the healing of all illnesses. Thus, St. Paul must learn from the Lord that, quote, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness, and that the sufferings to be endured can mean that in my flesh I complete what is lacking in Christ's afflictions for the sake of his body, that is, the church. I thought that was well stated, that prayers do not always obtain the healing of all illnesses. Just because there's an illness and God doesn't answer that request to have us or that individual we love healed doesn't mean that there is not a God. Sometimes that's part of God's plan. And I think that's what we have to say. Accept. Ed, is this really difficult? Is this incredibly challenging when there's somebody that is suffering within our family, when we're suffering ourselves? Absolutely. However, it is scripture-based, and our catechism strengthens that whole notation of that God is there, whether he answers these prayers or not. In fact, sometimes the answer to our prayers is that he's not going to step in. He's going to allow suffering to occur and so forth.
No, I totally
Final words
agree.
to you, brother.
I know, beautiful. John, it's always a pleasure being with you here on the show.
Brother,
what do you got coming up next?
So I have Deacon Dan Borne, our longtime friend. Normally you guys have the voice off. I think the next time he comes on, we'll have you guys do that. He's
it's still in the football season. How's he making time for you?
I know I consider him a genuine friend of the show, and he's always gracious about giving us his time. So he's a deacon. He is this announcer for basketball and football, and he always finds time. But listen, brother, before we go, I want to do something that I haven't done enough, and that is I want to thank you for all the time and effort that you spend in your parish trying to bring people closer to our Lord. You help coordinate the men's retreat. You've been a part of Chirp, Christ Renews His Parish, for years. I want to thank you for that. I want to thank you all you do. You're a great witness to our faith, brother, and thank you for coming on the show as always.
John, thank you. Thanks to you, too, for creating this ministry. This is a ministry where we can be disciples to others, so folks are listening in. Yeah, they love sports like we do, too. But it's also a way, little nuggets, because it ain't over till it's over.
That's a great ending, brother. Brother Ed, have a good Thanksgiving.
John, you and the family as well.
I appreciate it, buddy. We'll talk soon. So there you go, folks. Ed Billick, you're listening to Faith in Sport here on Radio Maria. Listen, we're going to go to a break right now. Stay with us. We'll be right back with more Faith in Sport right after this. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Faith in Sport. I'm Dr. John Acquaviva. Faith in Sport, where we merge sport and virtue. So especially character, ethics, morality, as it weaves its way into the world of sport. That's what this show's all about. You're listening to Radio Maria. Thank you for joining us today, wherever, whenever, and however. Listen, this is the second half of our show. Joining us in 1 minute is going to be Deacon Dan Borne, a longtime friend of this show, several-time guest, Diocese of Baton Rouge, permanent deacon at St. John Vianney. And one of the reasons the reason we did connect is that he is the voice of LSU, Louisiana State University football and basketball. And as you'll hear, he has one of the greatest voices, not only of an announcer, but of a deacon. Boy, I bet when he reads the gospel, people pay attention. You're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. He's going to be with us in just a few seconds. After the Dan Borne segment, we're going to do weekend headlines. I'll bring you up to date on some of the big sports stories, what's going on in certain sports. And then we're going to end with a quick Q&A with Dr. A. I'm going to throw a question that I've gotten in the past, and then I'll address it. Again, folks, thank you for joining us here on Radio Maria. I am so glad to bring you this show. It brings me a great deal of energy, and I'm just so glad that you're part of it today. So let's bring on our second half guest. He is Deacon Dan Borne, the voice of LSU football and basketball, permanent deacon at St. John Vianney. Deacon Dan, welcome back to Faith in Sport.
Thank you very much, John. It's great to be with you and your colleagues, and looking forward to the interview. I'm actually on my way to pick up a grandson who's out of school this week, and to take him to Tiger Stadium to show him where he's going to be sitting for the ball game that we're going to play on Saturday against Texas A&M. So it's an exciting time here in Baton Rouge.
Now, have you taken this particular grandson to an LSU game before?
No, this will be his first game in the stadium, and my daughter will be taking him along with my son, my daughter-in-law, and their 2 kids. So we'll have 3 grandkids, and the family will be well represented when we take on the Texas Aggies.
Deacon Dan, let me ask you. This past weekend, I had this great opportunity. It was my hit of the week. I got a chance to take my son, Luke, 12 years old, to his first Michigan game. I was born and raised a Michigan fan. Even though we live here in North Carolina, he's been raised as a Michigan fan, and he's taking it hook, line, and sinker. And we were blessed to have our good friend, a priest who is the Catholic chaplain at Maryland, but he's also the chaplain of the football team, get us tickets. I'm just curious, how often a month do people come up to you and ask you for tickets for LSU basketball or football?
It happens quite a bit. And
what do you say?
Well, I tell them that my family uses the tickets that of course we have, and we've had them for years, for almost 40 years. And and we have a really, really good ticket exchange here at LSU. We go through a ticket exchange company. And you rarely is there a time when you can't get a ticket to an LSU game. Now, you might have to pay a premium for it, but they're generally available. Now, if you have a connection like the chaplain of the Maryland team, that's a pretty good connection. But you've got a conflict of interest there, man. You have a chaplain praying for the Terrapins, and you've got you and your son praying for Michigan, who, by the way, has one of the great fight songs of all football. I love the Michigan fight song. Yeah.
No. In fact, he even it's so funny. He goes, I actually kind of like Michigan. He said this on the way when we were walking through campus. And I said, Father, don't say that too loud. He goes, I love the fight song. And how do you not like the uniforms and the helmets? I thought that was so funny. But of course.
Well, my question is, did you get to coach along the sidelines since Harbaugh was not coaching on the sidelines? Right. I thought maybe they would make you, the honorary guest coach. We have those at LSU, by the way.
No, I appreciate it. But you know what I did instead? Because he was on the sideline. So I snuck down to the Maryland sideline and I coached the Maryland team, and I gave them all the worst plays so Michigan would win.
Well, I tell you, running the worst plays, they still gave Michigan a handful, didn't they?
No, yeah. That was a really close game. But you know what was so special about it, Dan? And you probably know this, being right on the front line of college football. It was Michigan's 1,000th win of all time. It's the all-time most wins of any college football program. And we were at that game. I thought that was so cool. So awesome.
That's really historic. And of course, the game coming up is going to decide, one of the 4 teams in the Final Four. It would be rare if a one-loss team would get in losing this late, but you just never know. You never know what the committee is going to do. I think with Florida State and its quarterback out, it might factor some of the thinking. In fact, as a matter of fact, I think Florida State slipped down to number 5, and they're a very, very good team. They beat us in the opening game of the season. They're terrific team, undefeated, and so I know. We'll see.
I agree, brother. I think if they go undefeated, they won't go in. In fact, I think the committee does not like the fact that their star quarterback. I mean, he's a Heisman Trophy candidate, and he's their best player, and he's the difference whether they make it into the playoff or not. Let's face it, you and I are not going to be surprised. Nor will any Florida State. They'll be disappointed, but they won't be surprised if they get left out of that playoff.
You're right. I think they're going to they could very well end up with 4 defeated teams, which would be great.
Yes. Brother, listen, let's switch gears. I love talking sports with you. I love talking college football with you. Switching gears a little bit, these are maybe some information that the average Catholic would like to know, and even if they don't think about this, I think they're going to find this interesting. When you were ordained, and when a deacon is ordained, a permanent deacon is ordained, are they ordained for their parish or the diocese? Like where you are still? I'll just leave it with that. For the diocese.
Yeah, that's a great question. I've been at Saint Jean Vianney for 13 years, and just a few months ago, 3 or 4 months ago, when my pastor retired, he had been there 16 years.
Yeah.
When he retired from what we call parochial or parish ministry, that's a fancy word for parish, I retired from parish ministry as well, which means that I don't have an obligation every weekend to participate in the activities of the parish or during the week.
Sure.
I still work for the bishop. I work in the bishop's office. I am the media spokesperson for Bishop Michael Duke in the Diocese of Baton Rouge. And I still work on the Deacon Advisory Board and serve as a formator or a teacher in formation programs. But when a deacon is ordained, that deacon is ordained for his diocese or his archdiocese, okay? Yep. And the primary obedience of a deacon is to what we call the ordinary, the bishop, or in the case of an archdiocese, the archbishop. So you are basically ordained and subject to the bishop's authority.
Got it.
But almost every ordained deacon, I don't know of any, would be assigned to a parish initially, and that would be a decision that the deacon would make a recommendation on, the bishop would make a recommendation, and the pastor of the parish would make a recommendation. So generally, these assignments fit. Okay, rarely is someone assigned like they do in the military and say, you're going to be infantry instead of airborne. And it could be airborne and infantry. But the point is, these are collegial type decisions. And so a deacon gets ordained to a parish, and that's generally for a 6-year term, a 6-year obligation. And sometimes that's extended, sometimes it isn't. Sometimes deacons, for whatever reason, get transferred. They move to a different part of the diocese. It becomes more convenient for them to serve at a different parish. And of course, the bishop is very, very understanding of that, and tries to accommodate the man and and one thing that's interesting too, John, while we're on that, priests, the first order of holy orders is the diaconate, and a priest is ordained as a deacon with the anticipation of being ordained as a priest. I was ordained as a deacon with the anticipation of continuing as a deacon for the rest of my life. And in other words, I didn't anticipate becoming a priest. But the diaconate, the diaconate to which I was ordained and to which even Bishop Duca was ordained is the same diaconate. It's the same entry level to holy orders. The difference is what's anticipated after being ordained. And so both a permanent deacon and what we call a transitional deacon, a deacon who is on his way to becoming a priest, they're both deacons in the Catholic Church, and both have been ordained to that first or entry level of holy orders.
Very good. That's well explained, brother. In fact, just this past weekend, Father Conrad Murphy, the gentleman at the University of Maryland that got the tickets for Luke and I, hovering around his office when I first got to the University of Maryland was a gentleman, Justin Clerics, and he introduced himself as deacon, but he was a transitional one, right? He just got ordained a deacon, and so he'll be ordained actually probably sometime this spring.
Folks, and by the way, John, there's no mystery in this about the diaconate. If you're male and if you're between the ages of approximately 35 and 60, and some dioceses slip a little bit on both of those ages, then you should and you feel like you might have a ministry of charity that's calling you to at least inquire into the diaconate. I'm a big believer in the power of the ask. It's how I got the job at LSU as the PA announcer. No one else asked for it, and I had asked, and there it is. And I always ask men, especially guys like you, who are young and who are faithful, it might be something that you would like to inquire about. So I would say get with your diocese and your director of your permanent diaconate program and chat about it.
I love that word of encouragement. Folks, we're talking with Deacon Dan Borne, a permanent deacon at St. John Vianney in the Diocese of Baton Rouge, and the voice of LSU football and basketball. You're listening to Faith in Sport, where we apply our faith to all aspects of sport. And when I read about Deacon Dan Borne a couple years ago, it took me about 18/10 of a second to go, I got to get him on the show. And you have said yes so many times. I'm so appreciative of that. Now, you've talked a lot about the diaconate, and here's what I want to know, and I bet our listeners would be curious about this as well. You're a faithful guy. You were probably born and raised like me. You're a cradle Catholic. How has the diaconate itself, upon ordination, and I don't mean your task, your duties, the sacraments and so forth that you perform, but how did your personal spiritual life get impacted once you became a permanent deacon, Dan?
Well, I grew up in a Catholic family, of course, in South Louisiana, in a Catholic community and a Catholic parish, civil parish. We called them parishes in Louisiana instead of counties.
That's right.
In a very Catholic part of South Louisiana.
Okay.
And my mother and father were the first models for me of the faith. And my father, my mother taught me to be committed to my faith, and my father taught me to be faithful to my commitments. And I tried to grow up being faithful to those two values that my parents tried to instill in me and in my brothers. And there was a period of time in my life when my wife was going off for long periods of time to Florida to be formed as an Ignatian spiritual director. Okay. And she would go off for weeks at a time over the course of 3 years. And I became much more interested in the Blessed Sacrament, going to daily Mass and taking Holy Communion. And it was through this process of continuing taking the Blessed Sacrament that I found this tug, this gentle pull about, hey, why don't you look into the diaconate and who deacons are and what deacons do? And I had a good friend who ran the diaconate program in New Orleans,
sure,
who had encouraged me over years to come and take a look. And so I did, and began formation in New Orleans because of timing issues, and finished formation here in Baton Rouge. And because of the cooperation between Bishop Emeritus Munch and Archbishop Hughes, I was able to, for 1 year of that, spend in formation in both the Archdiocese and the diocese. And what I learned through that in the development of both the academic and the human and the spiritual formation pillars is that there's a very, very deep responsibility that goes with being a deacon.
Yes.
Because you are, and I don't want to make it like we're anything special, because we aren't, but in a way, we are sacraments and work clothes. A sacrament is a sign.
Yeah.
A visible sign to people of God's grace. And when you are ordained a deacon, you are receiving the sacrament of holy orders. And so we are ordained to preach, although you don't have to preach. We are ordained to help at the table or to help at the cup during Mass by distributing the cup. But our primary responsibility is we are ordained to serve, because the word deacon comes from the Greek word that basically means service. So perfect. We are to be out there, and people know we're deacons, people know we're serving, and hopefully we can through our service and through our example, and again, we're all sinners and we all fall short, but perhaps we can show people a side of the church that proves that our faith is caring, is loving, yep, and is constantly outreaching in works of charity to bring people to a closer relationship with Jesus Christ.
Outstanding. It was as if you prepared for this attending the this show today, brother. That was terrific. No, I mean that. I think too many times when people take their faith for granted, they take the holy orders for granted. But this is coming to life, and this is stated with energy, and you have purpose in everything you do. And for coming on this show, brother, that was terrific. Listen, before we go on a lighter note, Jaden Daniels is the quarterback for LSU. Mm-hmm. I have my thoughts on this. Do you believe? I think he's going to get invited to New York for the 5 finalists for the Heisman Trophy, or whoever the top voters are. Sometimes it's 3 guys, sometimes it's 5 guys. Mm-hmm. Do you think he's going to win it?
Well, I think it's a dead heat now, or just about a dead heat between Bo Nix, former SEC quarterback, by the way. Bo Nix played at Auburn. In fact, I called 2 games when Bo was quarterbacking Auburn. We won the first one in 2019 with Joe Burrow and that team. And when they came back and played in 21, I called that game as well, and Auburn beat us. So Nix is an outstanding quarterback. I think with Jaden Daniels, though, Jaden reminds me of the great line in Forrest Gump,
which is,
Jaden's like a box of chocolate. You never know what you're going to get, because when he stands behind that center and he claps his hands, whatever you pick from that box is going to be sweet if you're on offense.
Yep.
And whatever you pick from that box is going to be bitter if you're on defense, because you just don't know where Jaden is heading.
No,
the kid, his combination yards, his rushing and his passing far surpass any candidate for the Heisman Trophy this year. You've got superior candidates, but you don't have anyone that's the whole package.
But also
who can run, who can pass, and who can make split second decisions.
No,
to help
of course.
His team.
No, and he's my vote for the Heisman, and I'll tell you why. Because he would be clearly in first place if they were undefeated, and that's what bothers me about the Heisman Trophy voting, is that it seems to be in part on the overall team record. In other words, if everything's the same, and I get it, but there should be other factors there. They've lost 3 times now. They should.
My answer to that is to look at what he did in the 3 games we lost.
That's right.
Look at the contribution he made to the team in those 3 games.
That's right. Because sometimes
understand that our defense this year has been challenged.
Suspect.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. No. So, I agree.
And so I mean that's a good argument for Nix and others, of course. But A, I'm prejudiced because he's our guy, and second, all prejudice aside, I think you look at the total package, and there have been other players who have won the Heisman Trophy whose teams have not, won every game or even lost but 1 game, and hopefully they'll look at the whole package.
No, of course. And, one of the things that I am highly confident of, Dan Borne, is that the voters for the Heisman Trophy are regular listeners to Faith in Sport. So, brother, I did that on purpose. Let's that
well,
right there. We earned it.
You can bet they are. And you can tell them that you can bet coming out of Louisiana, Jaden's going to have a lot of votes because, as you know, we're famous in Louisiana for having just about anybody who can breathe vote. Okay. and maybe even some dead people too,
I've heard that before. Deacon Dan Borne, one thing before we go, just a side note.
Sure.
We have 5 kids. Our youngest is Jack, but his given name is John. And believe it or not, it's not after me. It's after his maternal grandfather. And we designated that he has been named after St. John Vianney, brother. So
that's wonderful.
Yes,
that's wonderful. What a great saint, and really, really have him study the life of St. John Vianney.
Oh yeah. Dan, when I was in my early stages of adulthood, when I was like reverting to the faith, the first book I ever read about a Catholic saint was St. John Vianney, and boy, is that a terrific story. So, folks, just one more thing to put on your bookshelf. Deacon Dan Borne, thank you for being a great witness to the Catholic faith. Thank you for being on the show today. And please, when I send out that email, say yes again, because you're a terrific guest, brother.
John, thanks a million. I look forward to it every year. And man, I tell you, Michigan State, go get those Buckeyes and thump them, okay?
Oh, we're going to do it. We're going to do the best we can. Deacon Dan Borne, you have a good day. We'll talk soon.
Thanks so much, John. Take care. Bye-bye.
Ciao. There you go, folks. Deacon Dan Borne, a permanent deacon at St. John Vianney in the Diocese of Baton Rouge, the voice of LSU football and basketball. If you want to see him at work, you don't have to drive down to LSU. You don't have to drive to the state of Louisiana, although some of our Radio Maria listeners are not too far from that. But all you have to do is go on YouTube. And if you put in Dan Borne, there's stories about him. He talks about his faith, but also there's videos of him working at basketball and football games. And boy, is he on fire for the faith. And boy, is he represent our faith well. So pray for him, pray for all our deacons, and pray for more vocations to the diaconate. We need those men in those roles as much as we do priests. They're terrific members of our communities, and they're terrific servants. Listen, folks, we just got a couple minutes left. I'm going to do a couple things. We're going to do weekend headlines, and I'm going to spend a couple minutes addressing a question that was written in on about referees and umpires calls. So let's do this first. Let's do weekend headlines, and then we'll jump into that quick Q&A with Dr. A. In college football, as we just mentioned, it's a big weekend ahead of us. It's rivalry week. Alabama plays Auburn, Florida plays Florida State, Oregon goes up against Oregon State, and so forth. You get the kind of the pattern there. But the biggest one, at least as far as rankings, is number 2 Ohio State, as Deacon Dan Borne just mentioned, goes to Ann Arbor to play number 3 Michigan. So it's number 2 and number 3. These matchups during the season don't happen very often at all. In fact, if you look up how many times one has played number 2, it's less than a dozen times. So 2 against 3 is a big deal. By the way, the current top 5 in college football is Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, University of Washington, and Florida State. In the NHL, the season is in its 5th week, and the Boston Bruins remain scorching red hot with still only 1 loss to go with their 13 wins. Outstanding start. The New York Rangers and reigning Stanley Cup champs, Colorado Avalanche, and actually the Las Vegas Knights, not the Colorado Avalanche, are doing great, as well as they sit on top of their respective divisions. So again, the Stanley Cup champs is the Las Vegas Knights, not the Avalanche. College basketball, well, it's underway. Although a long way from March and its madness, most teams have played up to 5 games. The current top 5 there are Kansas, Purdue, Arizona, Marquette, and UConn. So there you have it, folks. Sports that may or may not change your life. All right, folks. One of the things before we get into the quick Q&A with Dr. A is Ed in the first segment was encouraging everybody to send in, what is your hit or miss of the week? What story do you have for faith in sport? I want you to share a story. I want you to share a hit or miss in your week, or even something that is special to you that happened that I could read on air. If you're willing to come on air, I'll certainly consider that. But also, if you know somebody in your community that is involved in sport, they're a faithful individual, and you feel that they've had terrific impact, even if they're not a big story in the local paper or on the internet, but you just feel that they have been impactful to those young lads that they teach or coach, I should say, let me know. And I mentioned the addresses that you can contact me earlier. Let me give them again. You can tweet me at j.acquaviva1. That's J, for my first name, John, .acquaviva1, the number 1. You can tweet me there. Or you can email me at faithandsport@wingate.edu, and that's A-N-D in there, faithandsport@wingate.edu. All right, let's close out this show with something that I thought is a terrific question, and it's something that we need to grapple with as an athlete, and something to consider as a fan too. As an athlete, is it a good idea to correct the umpire or referee when they make the wrong call, even if the call is against you or is against your opponent? Is it a good idea to correct basically a referee or an umpire in any case? Well, it is an interesting question. It's an interesting debate for sure. But the simple answer is no, you should not correct the official, even when their original decision benefits you and your team. Here's what I mean. Let's say you're playing in a basketball game. The ball is about to go out of bounds, and you and the opposing player are attempting to gain possession, right? You're both reaching for the ball. As both of you are grabbing the ball, it goes out of bounds, and you feel that you were the last to touch the ball. Even though you may not signal it to the referee, you feel that you were So hence it should be the other team's ball. However, the referee signals that it's your ball, that he or she saw it as it went off your opponent. So the Christian thing to do would be to notify the referee since you last touched it, correct? No, not so fast. There are a few reasons why it's a bad idea, a really bad idea, by the way, to correct the referee or umpire. One, it disrupts the flow of the game. Here's what I mean. Few things would be more unsettling to a game than for the players to constantly correct the referee, regardless of their motive. Let them do their job. Second, and related to the first, it undermines the official. Right or wrong, folks, they are hired to serve that particular game, and their decisions must stand as the official rulings of the game. Whether they're right or wrong, often, your job is to accept it and further, to not berate them or insult them and have respect for them the entire time. Third, and probably as biggest point as I can make, you could be wrong. In other words, if you think the ball went off you could just simply be mistaken. The game is moving so quickly. Your angle on the whole situation might be bad as a fan or as a coach. And even the player sometimes in the whole movement of the game, the whole intensity of the game may have no idea who really the ball went off of. So many athletes, albeit a noble gesture, desire to do the right thing by telling the referee to make a call against them, or worse, the athletes may portray themselves as righteous, as in, look how Christian I am. In either case, trying to correct the official when you're actually wrong creates a big mess and is a situation that is best avoided altogether. In other words, let them do their job. You be the fan or the athlete or the coach, and you let them do theirs. Let them be the referee. Well, there you go, folks. Quick Q&A with Dr. A. Hey, listen, one of the things that I like to do is end this discussion with a quote from a pope about the world of sport. And here's one from St. John Paul II. When sports are played and understood in the right way, they are an extraordinary expression of a person's best inner energies and of his ability to overcome the difficulties of competition. This is a big compliment to the world of sport, that not only St. John Paul II, but it was through him started the Office of Church and Sport, in which he wanted to embrace sport as the overall experience that we have in what we call life. It can be a good thing, and not just that, it can be a great thing and a great way to honor God. It's through sport and how we act through sport. So there you go. St. John Paul II. Before we go, a special thank you to Ed Billick, longtime friend, longtime special guest, and to Deacon Dan Borne. Boy, he was terrific. Feel free to pass this show along to anybody so you can hear both of those segments. I thought these were particularly good segments today. I thank those guys for joining me on the show today. I'm Dr. John Acquaviva. Please join us next time here on Radio Maria for more Faith in Sport. And St. Sebastian, pray for us.
Hello, God's beloved. I'm Annabelle Mosley, author, professor of theology, and host of Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. I invite you to listen in and find inspiration along this sacred journey we're traveling together to make our lives a masterpiece and, with God's grace, become saints. Join me, Annabelle Mosley, for Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. God bless you. Remember, you're never alone. God is always with you.
Thank you for listening to a production of WCAT Radio. Please join us in our mission of evangelization. And don't forget, love lifts up when knowledge takes flight.